FBI is an honest, apolitical organization.
And if it's a contest between James Comey's credibility and Donald Trump's credibility, I think Comey's brand wins that, 10 out of 10 times.
The report is now here. It has dropped, and it might not have produced everything of what some Republicans hoped for. It is, regardless, devastating to the FBI. And to a degree, it does exonerate Donald Trump.
Former FBI Director James Comey. Director, welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks for having me.
You have been taking something of a victory lap since the IG report was released earlier this week. The question is whether or not it's justified. Here are you and the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, answering the same question.
Do you think this is vindication?
It is. I mean, the FBI's had to wait 2 years while the president and his followers lied about the institution. Finally, the truth gets told.
Does your report vindicate Mr. Comey?
It doesn't vindicate anyone at the FBI who touched this, including the leadership.
The IG says you should feel no vindication.
Well, maybe it turns upon how we understand the word. What I mean is that the FBI was accused of treason, of illegal spying, of tapping Mr. Trump's wires illegally, of opening an investigation without justification, of being a criminal conspiracy to defeat and then unseat a president. All of that was nonsense. I think it's really important that the Inspector General looked at that and that the American people, your viewers and all viewers, understand that's true. But he also found things that we were never accused of, which is real sloppiness, and that's concerning. As I've said all along, has to be focused on. If I were director, I'd be very concerned about it and diving into it.
Well, sloppiness may be a euphemism for what it is he found. One of his big concerns is the way the FBI handled the FISA applications and the warrants that allowed you to surveil Carter Page, who was a former foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign. Again, here is what you said about the FISA process and what the Inspector General Horowitz said this week. Take a look.
I have total confidence that the FISA process was followed and that the entire case was handled in a thoughtful, responsible way by DOJ and the FBI.
We identified significant inaccuracies and omissions in each of the 4 applications, 7 in the first application and a total of 17 by the final renewal application.
17 significant errors in the FISA process, and you say that it was handled in a thoughtful and appropriate way.
Yeah, he's right. I was wrong. I was overconfident in the procedures that the FBI and Justice had built over 20 years. I thought they were robust enough. It's incredibly hard to get a FISA. I was overconfident in those because he's right. There was real sloppiness. 17 things that either should have been in the applications or at least discussed and characterized differently. It was not acceptable. And so he's right. I was wrong.
But you make it sound like you're a bystander, an eyewitness. You were the director of the FBI while a lot of this was going on, sir.
Sure. I'm responsible for that. That's why I'm telling you I was wrong. I was overconfident as director in our procedures. And it's important that a leader be accountable and transparent. If I were still director, I'd be saying exactly the same thing that Chris Wray is saying, which is we are going to get to the bottom of this, because the most important question is it systemic? Are there problems in other cases?
Mr. Trump also asserted in that tweet that he was that the application or the president's order was turned down by a court. Was there any request made by the FBI or Justice Department to wiretap Donald Trump turned down by a court?
That's one of those subjects I can't comment on one way or another. Please don't interpret that in any way other than I just can't talk about anything that relates to the FISA process in an open setting. The FBI is an honest, apolitical organization.
It was a seditious conspiracy, and the inside man was James Comey. This was cooked up by Brennan and Clapper and Susan Rice, and they left Comey to be a part of the Trump administration to erupt this Russia hoax lie. Now we will always think of 2016 to about 2019 as the Russia hoax era of American politics, and I took particular note at how Jim Comey was always asking, where's that FISA? Where's that warrant to do that spying that was approximate to the Trump campaign?
And if it's a contest between James Comey's credibility and Donald Trump's credibility, I think Comey's brand wins that, 10 out of 10 times.
I meet with each assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York on their first morning before I administer the oath. And I give them what they now teasingly call the speech. And I tell them what my expectations are for their job. And the most important thing I tell them is that they are about to begin the journey of a lifetime, because they're about to take a job where their only obligation is to do the right thing, and an opportunity few people ever have. And I tell them that you are about to get a gift that you didn't earn, and that was earned for you by things done and sacrifices made by people long since gone. And that is this: when you stand up as an assistant U.S. attorney and say, I represent the United States of America, people believe the next thing you say. You didn't earn that. That's a gift, is what I tell them. And I tell them that you've gotten from those people long since gone a reservoir of trust and credibility. And your absolute obligation, and I will insist upon it as your U.S. attorney, is that you take that reservoir, you guard it, you protect it, and you turn it over to the next group that follows you as full as you got it or fuller.
You look at this White House now, and it's hard to imagine 2 FBI agents ending up in the sit room. How did that happen?
I sent them. Something I probably wouldn't have done or maybe gotten away with in a more organized investigation, a more organized administration, in the George W. Bush administration, for example, or the Obama administration. The protocol, 2 men that all of us have perhaps increased appreciation for over the last 2 years. And in both of those administrations, there was process. And so if the FBI wanted to send agents into the White House itself to interview a senior official, you would work through the White House counsel, and there'd be discussions and approvals and who would be there. And I thought, it's early enough, let's just send a couple guys over. And so we placed a call to Flynn, said, hey, we're sending a couple guys over. The FBI is an honest, apolitical organization. Okay, thank you for submitting these questions. You have awful handwriting.
Hey, Mr. Comey. Hey, how is it ethical to brief the President of the United States on an unverifiable and salacious dossier? And how is it ethical leadership to not tell him that his political opposition, Hillary Clinton, paid for that? You didn't disclose that information. Why didn't you disclose to President Trump that his opposition paid for the material? You are not an ethical leader.
Also, new details that Durham brings out. Comey was the one who personally pushed for the spying. He pushed hard for the FISA. And now we're finding out that the FBI told their officials, don't write anything down. Don't put anything in writing, because they knew this was nasty.
And if it's a contest between James Comey's credibility and Donald Trump's credibility, I think Comey's brand wins that, 10 out of 10 times.
And finally, did you show copies of your memos to anyone outside of the Department of Justice?
Yes.
And to whom did you show copies?
I asked, President tweeted on Friday after I got fired that I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night, because it didn't dawn on me originally, that there might be corroboration for our conversation. There might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel. And so I asked a close friend of mine to do it.
And was that Mr. Wittes?
No, no.
Who was that?
A good friend of mine who's a professor at Columbia Law School.
Do you have any doubt that Russia attempted to interfere in the 2016 elections?
None. There should be no fuzz on this whatsoever. The Russians interfered in our election during the 2016 cycle. They did it with purpose. They did it with sophistication. They did it with overwhelming technical efforts. And it was an active measures campaign driven from the top of that government. There is no fuzz on that. I honestly never thought these words would come out of my mouth, but I don't know whether the current president of the United States was with prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow in 2013. It's possible, but I don't know.
Martha, thanks for having me on. The first conclusion that I have is this really does confirm that this was more an op than it was a valid investigation, driven by reasonable suspicion, where you open. That's the standard in order to open an investigation, and then probable cause in order to pursue it further. Executing search warrants and the like, we now know and see more plainly that maybe it's more akin to the CIA op in getting the 51 to sign a letter saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. It reeks of manipulation, and it's very sad for those of us who served in the Justice Department to see that this has been happening at the top levels of the FBI and the Department of Justice.
Is there any reason to think, I'm looking at James Comey's Twitter feed. He hasn't, interestingly, he hasn't mentioned a word about this. He's doing a book tour, but he hasn't had any reaction to this huge report, which really is scathing for him, Brett, under his leadership at the FBI, that he allowed this to continue without the kind of evidence that was necessary to pursue this, according to this independent special counsel report.
Yeah, Martha, at best, it's Jim Comey already having an inclination to dislike and not want President Trump in the White House. And at worst, it's the participation by, our agencies like the FBI in the manipulation. We may not know the full extent to whether it was one or the other, but at any rate, it was an absolute abject failure by Jim Comey, who was director of the FBI.
The Durham Report vindicates you in a number of different ways. It destroys Russia collusion. It validates your firing of FBI Director James Comey. It validates your criticisms of late Senator John McCain, who pushed this dossier in Washington. It proves that you've been targeted by a very vicious machine.
Yeah. Well, that's been obvious to me for a long time. I fired Comey, and that was a very wise thing to do. I'm glad I fired him, and I fired him very early. And he wasn't my pick either. I inherited him, but right. We got rid of him, and it's a lucky thing I did. Otherwise, it would have been far worse. But I would tell you that it's a great vindication, and it feels good. And the report has been, wildly praised. I wish it could have come faster, but the detail that he went into, 308 pages, the detail is extraordinary. And all of these people, I guess you could call it treason. You could call it a lot of different things. But this should never be allowed to happen in our country again.
The FBI is an honest, apolitical organization.
And if it's a contest between James Comey's credibility and Donald Trump's credibility, I think Comey's brand wins that, 10 out of 10 times.
The report is now here. It has dropped, and it might not have produced everything of what some Republicans hoped for. It is, regardless, devastating to the FBI. And to a degree, it does exonerate Donald Trump.
And this group of major losers did not just ruthlessly attack me, my family, and everyone who questioned their lies. They tried to divide our country, to poison the national debate, and to tear up the fabric of our great democracy, the greatest anywhere in the world.